Welcome back. A new study says spanking your children to make them behave doesn't really work, and Jen Tome is here with more information.
Well, Liz, the recent report says children who are spanked are 50% more likely to act out, throw temper tantrums, and be aggressive. For today's House Calls, Dr. William Garrison, the Chief of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics at UMass Memorial Medical Center, joins us live via Skype. Thank you, Dr. Garrison, for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with the basics. About how many parents use spanking as a method in child rearing here in America?
Well, in this study, about half the parents admitted to spanking their child in the previous month, but previous studies have suggested upwards of 80% of parents have at least spanked their child once during their childhood.
So how is this study different from others? Why should people take notice of this study?
Well, this study is in one of the primary pediatrics research journals because it's one of the first studies to control for things that could have caused aggression to begin with, such as was the child aggressive or had a predisposition to aggression at the age of 3, and also controlled for factors in the mothers, whether the mother was depressed, had substance abuse, had been abused herself in her marriage, and things like that. So this study statistically controlled for those factors and suggested that the spanking itself and the frequency of spanking was really what made the difference.
That's interesting. So they took out a lot of other factors. So
Right.
What about parents who threaten to spank their children but really never go through with it or seldom go through with it?
Well, we see really two types in that area. One is the parent who really threatens a lot but never actually spanks the child, and that's a lot of parents. And we see parents who sort of try not to spank the child but get angrier and angrier and angrier and then finally sort of blow up and spank the child, usually with more force than they intended. Those are the parents that we worry more about. The first type of parent, though, children are pretty smart and very adaptable. They figure out pretty quickly that mom or dad threatens to spank but never actually does. And so the parents start to find that they're yelling at the kids a lot or always threatening them and really basically trying to get the kids to behave through fear. And that doesn't work very well.
What does work?
Well, behavior modification techniques are usually the things that are recommended, things like timeout, taking away privileges, using rewards. If you behave in a way that I want you to behave, you'll get a reward. That's a much more positive approach, but positive approaches don't always work, and that's when we get into more consequences, such as taking away privileges. My favorite privilege is television or screen time.
Which is very, very valuable for kids.
Right.
Well, how does the U.S. compare to other countries in the world regarding spanking?
Well, in this country, it's not actually illegal to spank your children. In about 24 other countries around the world, it's actually against the law to spank your child, both in public and at home. Most of the Scandinavian countries, Italy, Austria, and a bunch of other countries have actually passed laws against that, primarily because of trying to defend the rights of children. Adults don't have the right to go around and hit other adults, and so some people ask the question, why is it that adults have the right to hit children?
So it's a good question and a fair question, and according to this study, it doesn't really work.
We've known that it doesn't work for a long time. What this study has kind of brought to the fore is that these kids actually become more aggressive. So you could take a child who's the age of 3 or 4. If they're spanked, and this study suggested more than twice a week, they look much more aggressive as 5 or 6-year-olds. So it's really saying to parents, if you spank your children, you should be prepared in the future that they may be more aggressive than they would have been otherwise.
Well, thank you, Dr. Garrison, for joining us today and telling us more about this study. Give us a different perspective on it. Now, if you hear about a study you would like to learn more about or have a health question, please email us at housecalls@cbs3springfield.com.